Lo siento por no hablar en español. Next time. Tres propositions, okay? Three propositions, two dialectics. The first proposition, neoliberalism is dead, long live neoliberalism. This is the old slogan of monarchies. Monarchies die, but the kings are reborn. In a way, neo-fascism, what we are seeing now in most parts of the Western world, is a symptom of neoliberalism. It's an attempt to get the working class in the northern countries to work harder. Labor market reforms, more labor discipline, less interest in questions of gender justice, more pressure on the right kind of women to have children and the wrong kind of women not to migrate to these countries, what is called neonatalism. This is the agenda of neo-fascism. There is no contradiction between this agenda and neoliberalism. In that sense, neoliberalism is dead, long live neoliberalism. That's the first proposition. The second proposition is that unipolarity is dying. This is very important. I didn't say unipolarity is dead. I said unipolarity is dying, but it's not dead. We know it's not dead because the NATO plus countries currently spend up to 80% of global military spending. And they are still capable of destroying any country in the global south. There is a reason, for instance, why the world hasn't sent its navies to liberate Gaza. And that's because the US has a fleet sitting in the Eastern Mediterranean, embargoing the entry of any military ship into the area. And they check ships that are going to the port of Beirut. They dominate the world's military contest. The United States has 900 military bases. The Chinese have none. I mean, you have to understand what it means to have 900 foreign military bases in the world. You can't underestimate this. The United States has a nuclear policy called counterforce, which means that they are not waiting to be fired on. They are ready to fire. There is no first strike policy from the United States. So to underestimate the United States military power and to scream and shout that unipolarity has ended is, I think, dangerous. We have to understand what they really are. If we are Marxists, we have to follow the actual motion of history and not what we imagine or would like to see happen. They still dominate the world's military. In that sense, unipolarity is dying, but it's not dead. In our institute, Tricontinental, we call this period the period of hyper-imperialism. The third proposition, BRICS is a commercial bloc that is being forced into politics. BRICS is not a political bloc. It emerges after the world financial crisis of 2007. It is a commercial bloc. That's the reason why, as Oscar said, it invited the oil powers in. There is no logic otherwise for Iran, Saudi Arabia, etc. to be brought into the BRICS plus bloc. There are other countries that should have been invited. If the principal dispute is political, Cuba should have been inside the BRICS plus bloc immediately, not just as a partner. Because Cuba, among all countries in the world, stands up against US imperialism. But no, it's a commercial bloc. It's being forced into politics because of the two dialectics I'm going to mention. So those are the three propositions. Neoliberalism is dead. Long live neoliberalism. Unipolarity is dying, but is not yet dead. BRICS is a commercial bloc that is being forced into politics. Okay? Three propositions. Two dialectics. A dialectic has two sides. So each dialectic has two sides. Don't get confused. The first dialectic is the dialectic of recent history. The West, having defeated, as it saw it, the Soviet Union, took certain risks. It allowed its industry to be globalized. It allows fixed capital to be built outside its shores. It allowed its big capitalists to no longer pay tax and to build an enormous financial sector. It made that allowance. That is what neoliberalism meant for the countries of the global north. For the countries of the global north, neoliberalism meant that the very rich, the capitalists, were allowed to go on a tax strike, and they didn't invest in their own countries. Patriotic capital disappeared, if it ever existed. There was no such thing now as French capital, American capital. Most German capital is invested in US and British stock markets. BlackRock is one of the biggest investment companies on the DAX. The second part of the first dialectic is what happens in the global south. Here, net fixed capital is built in almost all the countries, particularly in Asia. Latin America is a real outlier in this, and to some extent Africa. Net fixed capital is built in many parts of Asia, which is why Asia begins to see very high growth rates. The growth rate in Asia is not related to foreign direct investment. It is entirely related to the increase of net fixed capital. Because they industrialized and built infrastructure, they had robust growth year on year. You can have 1 year growth with foreign direct investment, but not year on year growth as you see in China, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Indonesia, India. It's not just a China story. It's very important to understand that. It's the center of gravity in Asia. That's the first dialectic between the cannibalization of the north and the building in the south, particularly in Asia. The second dialectic, the West's answer to the dilemma of its destruction is to go to war. That is why the West, with its decadent leadership, Macron, Trump, and so on, none of them with any ideas. That's why I use the word decadence. They are decaying in terms of ideas. They are intellectually barren. Western academic institutions haven't produced a Bertrand Russell in at least a generation. They are decadent and they are dangerous. They want to take the world to war. That's the first part of the dialectic of the future. Meanwhile, coming from the south, we have very different propositions which don't get talked about. For instance, when the Chinese put forward the idea of a common or shared future of humanity, that gets dismissed as talking points of the Chinese Communist Party. Yes, so what? So what? That's almost 100 million people. That's their talking points. But a shared future for humanity is a lot better than a limited nuclear war in the South China Sea. It is up to you as intellectuals to choose which end of the dialectic you want to emphasize. Do you want a world of war, or do you want to live in a world where we defend a culture of peace? Thanks a lot.